And then bring your attention back to the present. How did you find that? Good. Any of the first attendees find any observation? Easy? Difficult? Yeah, I know this. Yeah. Sometimes if you were to be asked to do that practice for some time, or if you were to attempt to do it, you might think this is boring, especially if you were a teenager, I think, right? I'm joking. It's boring. One thing. There's so many things I can be thinking about. It's almost as though it's you can think of it as an ascetic practice. Do you know that word, asceticism? Ascetic practice, something that you endure for spiritual reasons generally, or for some higher philosophical reason, some hardship that you endure, rather than allowing your mind to go off and engage in all of the multifarious modes that it might generally be doing. The Tibetan word for asceticism is kadup, attaining that which is difficult. So it's difficult not to be fascinated by these other thoughts in our mind. But if you do this for some time, you'll notice sometimes we have very little control of our mind. Our mind is jumping around like a monkey in the branches of a tree, picking fruit and being distracted by something else, and not having the ability to focus, just allowing these thoughts to dominate us. We don't really have much control about our own destiny. Oftentimes, we're much like Pavlov's dog, or who was the famous psychologist, Skinner? Was it B.F. Skinner? I actually attended one of his lectures at Yale one time when one of my buddies was attending Yale. And you know who Skinner was? Any of you? Behaviorists, believing that we're very much just reacting to stimuli and so forth. Yeah, so you can think of it as a kind of an ascetic practice, giving up these other things. And in so doing and focusing on one thing, you actually develop a clarity of mind that allows you to understand other things much better. It's like doing retreat. When you retreat away from worldly activities, even Jesus supposedly went to the garden, to the forest, or the desert, I think it says in the Bible, right? To pray, get away from things. And then the purpose of that then is to be able to attend to our other activities more authentically, when the mind is calm and you're spiritually rejuvenated and so forth. Okay, so that was a little prelude, a little clearing of the mind. And I wanted to talk a little bit about this concept of immeasurable joy, these four immeasurable thoughts. These thoughts occur in different places in Buddhism, and they have a very deep meaning. In the present context, they're a very good motivation. If you think about the meaning, don't just say the words as though it's just some ritual you have to say, some catechism or something, we have to say this thing at the beginning. Actually think of the meaning. Wouldn't it be wonderful if all beings had happiness in the cause of happiness? We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. Think in your mind, there may be many individuals who you don't have that feeling for. People that you have a little grudge toward, resentment toward. If they were to have happiness, you might not feel comfortable about that. So to actually engender this thought is what's called loving kindness in Buddhism. In Pali Buddhism, they call metta. In Sanskrit, the language is called maitri, loving kindness. subsequent to that, you can say the words and then meditate on immeasurable compassion. Wouldn't it be wonderful if everyone was free of suffering and the causes of suffering? So, as I mentioned last time, to think, for instance, how that would even benefit you if others were free of suffering, if there was less discontent, if there was no discontent and suffering outside in other people's minds, there wouldn't be the same chaos in the world. You wouldn't have to lock your doors, and you wouldn't have to be afraid to walk down the street for fear of being molested or mugged or anything like this. And then to think more openly, not just for the benefit that it might accrue to you, but if other people had happiness in the same way that if other people were free of suffering, just as we know how wonderful, how calming, secure it is if in our mind there are no worries. Is there anyone here who has no worries? Okay, so there's something bugging us usually, right? Something, even when we've figured out a lot of things, paid off the bills, there's still some kind of dissatisfaction. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could be in those rare moments when everything looks like, okay, no problem? We know how that feels. And we can imagine how that feels if we haven't experienced it. Wouldn't it be wonderful if everyone were to experience that state, free of suffering and the causes of suffering? Unruly mind, causes of suffering, and the actual experience of suffering. Now, a third thought in this sequence, which has, as I say, many different meanings, is called immeasurable joy. Wouldn't it be wonderful if everyone was not separated from the happiness that they already have, even higher happiness that's devoid of any kind of suffering? Let me mention for a moment why they're called immeasurable thoughts. Does any of the students that have that come to the, or what can we say, parishioners of the Kadamba Center, any of you know why they're called immeasurable thoughts? You're an older student, aren't you? You know why they're called immeasurable? Oh, okay. Oh, that's okay. Do you know, Donna, why they're called immeasurable? Oh, okay. Huh? I think that's pretty good. I'm going to just have a little bit of warm drink here. In one sense, that's true that the sphere of your understanding here is all beings. That includes anything with a mind from a Buddhist perspective. So animals, other beings in realms that we don't now even perceive. The hell realms. Buddhism believes there is a kind of very nightmare-like experience that's possible due to having created negative actions in the past. Upon death, you might experience this for a long period of time. Maybe a little bit like what in the Christian tradition is called hell, which you may have grown up to disbelieve because the nuns at the school were threatening you that if you did this or that, you might go to hell or something like that. So all beings would be so immeasurable in that sense, and immeasurable in other senses. Say, for instance, when you talk about immeasurable compassion, wouldn't it be wonderful if they were free from every type of suffering, not just gross suffering, but subtle suffering and most subtle suffering, immeasurable in that sense also. So immeasurable joy is thinking is really an antidote to a kind of mind that we all experience that we might call jealousy or envy. When someone else experiences good fortune or happiness, sometimes it's difficult to bear. Do you know what I'm saying? Like especially, let's say, when we talk about in the everyday interpersonal relationships, if you have a friend who you're very close to, a companion or boyfriend or girlfriend or something, and suddenly you might walk down the street, you see them talking, smiling with someone else, having a good time. Can you imagine that might bring up jealousy in your mind? I think you guys are very holy. You're all looking like, what's he talking about? I wouldn't feel jealousy. I would feel joy in their happiness. Well, some people in situations like that, lesser people than yourself, would feel a twang of discomfort, wanting, let's say, in that particular example, let's say interpersonal relation, wanting that person to be, quote, faithful to me, or I would be the one that would be their prime focus of having a good time. I would be the one that would bring joy to their, smile to their face. So if someone else is experiencing that, we would feel jealousy toward that interloper, that third person. Do we say, when we, in common vernacular, do we say, let's say, if this is our companion and this is the person they're spending some time with, we observe, do we feel jealous? We don't feel jealous of the person that we like, do we? We feel jealous of the other person. Is that how we say it? We feel envious or jealous. Envy is another word, slightly different. It may come a different image in your mind when you envy someone's. Um, in the case of jealousy or envy, it doesn't have to be only in terms of interpersonal relations. Just someone having good fortune, being born with beauty, or winning a contest, or becoming popular, and we envy them, or someone's wealth. Sometimes when that becomes very strong, it's very difficult to bear, and it's, for us, it's a state of suffering. And those particular minds of envy and jealousy, there might be an overlap between them. Do you see a difference between those two, envy and jealousy? But you can see there's basically feeling discontent with other people's, let's say, happiness. If our companion is happy with another person, or if an individual that we observe wins some acclaim, or is held in high esteem, or is beautiful, or whatever, we feel some envy or jealousy. We would like to have that ourselves, or we feel some sense they shouldn't have that. All of those states of mind disturb our real inner peace, our happiness, jealousy and envy. And they themselves are actions, mental actions. And they leave an imprint in our mind to experience something in the future that's uncomfortable. They create what's called, they create what's called karma. You've heard that word before, karma. Have you heard, ladies back there who come for some, anyone has never heard the word karma before? When I first came to the States, I mentioned one of the lectures before, when I came to Washington, D.C., I flew in from overseas, and in the parking lot, I saw a bumper sticker that said, your karma ran over my dogma, something like that. Or my karma ran over your dogma. When I ask people what karma means, when I was at the monastery in Wisconsin, school kids come, and they often would say, what goes around comes around. Did I mention this before? No. Have you heard that expression? Is that in some people, have you heard that some people think that's kind of the meaning of karma? What does that mean? What goes around comes around. You get what you give, okay. But do you know the origin of that phrase? What goes around comes around? Actually, search on the internet, you may find that it comes from the Dark Ages, when the plague, bubonic plague, was going around. So if I say, Venerable, is the plague coming to our village? She would say, what goes around eventually comes around. So it's not so much talking about karma, it's talking about sort of inevitability that something is going to happen. I think a better phrase is sort of, when you were trying to paraphrase what that meant, goes around, comes around, is what Christ is purported to have said in the Bible. I think, unless it's in the Old Testament, ye reap what ye sow. You've heard that expression, right? You reap what you sow. You get what you deserve, you might say. What you've laid out there, what you put out there, eventually you are going to experience the ripening of that on your own experience. Karma means action. So you are creating an action. In so doing, it's like sowing seeds in a field. You're sowing some imprints into your consciousness. If you constantly are thinking, uncomfortable thoughts, I hate people, so forth and so on, irritated, and the littlest thing will cause you to, traffic jam, you blow up, or you pull the gun from your glove compartment, and you've heard about this, right? They call it road rage. Has that happened around here? It used to happen more in the western states, I think, at one point. I heard more, or out in California, when big traffic jams and things like that. So you leave an imprint in your mind from actions you do, both good and bad actions, that will have a repercussion on you. So feeling jealousy, feeling envy toward others creates negative karma, we would say, terminology Buddhist. They're negative action. They are negative actions, and they leave an imprint in our mind, karmic imprints, which are like seeds, which eventually will come back to haunt us, and maybe others will be jealous of us in the future. You might think that would be good. I'd like to be in a position where others are jealous, but it may become a hindrance to us. We can experience many kind of unfortunate situations. We create so much negative action that way that can cause us to experience great suffering in the future. So one of the firmest, most effective antidotes to that is, let's say, when someone experiences good fortune, to recognize that this is not come about without cause or unjustly, although it may seem that way sometimes. Someone gets praised. Oh, here's an example. Someone gets praised in the office for some work you did. Has that ever happened? You've done something and someone else gets the recognition for it, and then maybe you're not in a position to feel, to express that, to call out and explain that I actually did that. I deserve the credit. Or maybe you do and the other people ignore you, but someone else, you might think that unjustly someone else has received some credit. Would that make sense? It would seem unjust, right? From the point of view of Buddhism, there's no way that another person could experience some recognition or some status or some success like that unless they created the cause in a previous life, some karmic seed. So if someone experiences wealth, or someone is more attractive than you in your own mind, someone is higher status, has more power, or is recognized in some way, that's a result. If from a Buddhist perspective, the primary cause of that is actions they've created, virtuous actions they've created in another life. Even if this life, I'm not sure what the sort of old classical literary term is a wastrel, someone who's just, sort of like doesn't do anything and has suddenly become, like the son or daughter of a rich family or something like this, and they're out drinking and wasting all of uh, their time. And you might think that that's unjust, and would you feel jealous about that and envious? Maybe not. That wouldn't be exactly the feeling you'd have, but you'd feel some resentment toward them, right? Or sort of condescension, someone like that. So all of these states of mind create negative karma. Instead of that, to have a mind that recognizes, that feels joy in other people's good fortune, in their happiness, that may be a bit difficult. Some of you may find no difficulty because you're not feeling strong jealousy right now, or strong envy, or strong resentment. But to find situations in your own experience, to see all of the people around you, and to think in your daily life when that is encountered, rather than feeling jealousy, envy, or resentment, to rejoice in the other person's good fortune, to think, just like that, their happiness is a result of their virtuous karma in the past. And just like that, may I be able to create that kind of karma myself. In so doing, you actually create the karma to experience that by wishing that. Let's say also, when people create the cause of happiness, not just happiness right now, they're generous, or you see them engaging in spiritual activities, or they're talented, you see them doing something, you may feel jealous about that too, or envious that they have the chance to do, let's say from a spiritual point of view, they have a chance to do retreat or meditation, or that there's, something like that. They're creating some good karma by rejoicing in the good actions of others, rather than feeling jealousy about it. You create as much, or sometimes even more, virtue than they are creating. I'll give you an example from the time of the Buddha. It was a tradition in the time of the Buddha, about 2,500 years ago, that if a patron were to invite the Buddha himself and his entourage, his monks and nuns that were around, if they were to invite them to a meal, it was the tradition afterwards that the Buddha would give a discourse teaching. It was kind of like, first they would offer something, kind of symbiotic relationship between the laity and the clergy, so to speak. The laity would offer something, in this case, food, meal, and the clergy, the Buddha and his disciples, would offer some kind of spiritual advice. So on one of these occasions, a king and his family had offered a very lavish blast, and for the monks, a little bit out of pride, a little bit showing off. You can imagine that? I remember when I was in Italy, there were some towns that had many, many towers. Do you know what I'm thinking of? What were they for? What do they call them?
I can't remember what they called them, but it was about pride.
It was about pride, yeah. Maybe bell towers, not minaret, something like minarets also, but this is talking about Catholicism. In one town might build one, and another town would build one a little bit taller, and something. So there's some kind of spiritual jealousy or pride going on. So this is what was happening with the family. And it was a tradition also that after the meal, the Buddha would make a dedication. He would pray that these merits, the good, virtuous, good karma that the family had accrued would multiply and so forth, would bring great benefit and so forth. It's a complicated subject about that. But anyway, there was a beggar outside the fence at this time who saw what was going on. And instead of feeling jealousy that the king was creating this good karma, actually rejoiced. Oh, wow, if I was in a position to be able to make offering to the Buddha and his disciples, how wonderful that would be. This is so great that the king is offering, or this wealthy person is offering all of this, very positive mind, rejoicing in the good fortune of the other, not in, well, both in the fact that they had the resources, but the fact that they were doing a virtuous action, rejoicing in that virtuous action. So at the end, when the Buddha was asked by the wealthy person to dedicate the merits, make prayers, Buddha pointed out the man outside the fence and said, I'm going to dedicate his merits because he's created, by rejoicing in what you've done, he's created more virtue than you have created. Does that make sense? We can, if we're at an equal or higher spiritual level than someone else, we may, by rejoicing in their good actions, feeling joy, we can create more virtuous karma than they are actually creating, rather than feeling envious of them. So this particular thought, immeasurable joy, has many facets to it. We are preventing ourselves from feeling resentment, jealousy, and envy that would create negative karma, and instead turning it around, actually creating virtue, putting our mind at ease, becoming a friend to the world. If do you know someone in your own life, in your own sphere, family, or life, who is beleaguered by jealousy, has a problem with jealousy? Are they very popular, generally? Generally, no, we generally see that as something which is not an endearing trait, right? So also, to overcome our own jealousy and envy and resentment, we become more attractive to others, more at peace with the world, less competitive. Often competition comes about because of jealousy. And competition, if there was a real capitalist materialist here, they might argue with me, right? Competition is good, right? Sometimes competition is good, but generally just competition for the sake of trying to outdo other people, become the richest person, the highest status person, the thinnest lady or man, or the most attractive, or sometimes it drives us crazy, and it causes resentment in others. So to have this mind of joy in the happiness of others makes us attractive to others, makes us a friend to others. We don't create negative karma through envy and jealousy, and we create virtue in feeling this joy in the good fortune of others. Does that make sense to you? Anyone have a doubt or a question? Okay. You can even rejoice in your own good fortune. Say, for instance, you've come to Kadampa Center and you do some meditation and you have some good experience, let's say. I don't know, maybe you're not having a good experience. Maybe you'll leave bummed out afterwards. I don't know. But if you have a good experience, and then you can think afterwards, wow, wasn't that good? I wish I would do that again. Or to rejoice in that, to think how wonderful that was, rather than feeling a resentment or discomfort and regret about that.